Hello and welcome back to the Horror of Video Games. Today I'm talking about the theme of threat and safety. The reason why I think this is so important in horror games is because it presents the player with emotional peaks and troughs throughout the entire game, and ultimately makes the game more compelling, more rewarding, and more thrilling to play. I think the point I'd like to make is the fact that the more extreme the difference between threat and safety, the more of an emotional rollercoaster the player will go through, going from these jarringly different experiences, going from serene safety to nightmarish danger within a few seconds of each other. This leads to very, very interesting, very dynamic gameplay. And on the flip side of this, you have what I call the constant threat scenarios. So games like Doom 3, Alien Isolation, Fear, Slender, Quake, Condemned, Dead Space 2, all these games, there really aren't any safe areas in these games. You are just constantly, from corridor to corridor, you're killing enemies, you're under threat, you're in danger all the time. So these games give you no respite, they give you no chance to take stock of the situation. You just got to keep going forward. This is what I call the constant threat scenario. And then there are games which I say they invade the safe space. For example, Left 4 Dead, Cry of Fear, Alien Isolation, Amnesia. They take what is presented as a safe space and then they invade the safe space through zombies and monsters. And for example, in Left 4 Dead with the safe zones, zombies can still come into the safe zones in that game. They can still get you, hunters and etc. They can still get inside that safe space, and so it crosses the boundary between threat and safety. And also the lockers in Alien Isolation, you're not perfectly safe in those lockers. I mean, if you get in there too late, the alien can still open the locker and get you. And I think this invasion of the safe space occurs in Amnesia because they have this very interesting mechanic where throughout the whole game you're led to believe that light equals safety and darkness equals danger. Now, when the shadow arrives, this mechanic gets turned on its head, where light becomes the danger and darkness becomes the safety. And it's like, if you stay in the darkness, it makes you go insane. Whereas if you're in the light, you'll get caught by the shadow. So you're forced to stay in the darkness and lose your sanity, and thus risk dying, but in order to escape the shadow in this game. So it's very, very fascinating game mechanics in Amnesia. I think the reason why Left 4 Dead is very interesting in terms of this theme of threat and safety is because you have clearly defined areas of safety, you have clearly defined areas of threat, but within the game, the AI director will almost undulate the areas of threat and safety within different zones. So for example, there will be kind of waves of safety and waves of threat, and this game comes across as very, very flexible in terms of the horror it's demonstrating. And then there's a game I feel that crosses the boundaries between these two things, and that game is Metro 2033. It doesn't really clearly define areas of threat and safety. You're stuck in the underground, which is a dangerous area, and halfway through the game you can go up an escalator and go to the surface, which is a desolate, deserted, radioactive wasteland full of dragons flying around. So you're left with a scenario where the surface is dangerous and the underground is dangerous, and on the underground, and then you have to think to yourself, which would you rather be in? Would you rather be on the surface, or would you rather be in the underground? And it presents this very interesting question to the player. Where do you feel safe? Where do you feel safe in this game? Do you feel safe underground or overground? Sometimes you feel safe with your communities, with your friends. Sometimes, and then you bump into other pockets of other people, other communities, and you feel safe with them, and then there's a gunfight, and then you're not safe again. This game is fascinating because it really crosses the boundaries between threat and safety, and it's asking the question to the player, where do you feel safe in this game? I think within Resident Evil, you have this very interesting mechanic of the game presenting and withdrawing hope from the player. For example, when the player comes across the shotgun on the wall, the player will think to themselves, oh yes, I have a shotgun, great, I'll be perfectly safe, now I've got a shotgun, it'll be great. And then you leave the room, and then you proceed to being squashed by the wall trap above, and you realise, okay, so I couldn't actually take that shotgun. So the player ultimately has to put the shotgun back, and the game is subtly presenting and withdrawing hope throughout the whole game. And for example, when the player has to collect death masks to unlock the next phase of the game, the reward for collecting these masks is not a weapon or ammunition. The reward for collecting these death masks is yet another zombie, a far more vicious zombie. So the game is almost rewarding you and punishing you at the same time, and I think this is very unusual. A game I wanted to mention for a while now is Aliens vs Predator, this classic game, this very old game. Now, the reason why I don't think the horror in this game is very effective is because of two things. One, the motion tracker, and the smart gun. Now, with these two equipped at the same time, you know where the enemies are, you know when they're about to appear, and also when they do appear, you can kill them very easily with the smart gun. And I think this really affects the horror that Aliens vs Predator is trying to create. You may say to me, Tom, why is threat and safety so important in horror games? I'll tell you why. The reason is because threat and safety act as full stops for a game's narrative, and then they provide the gamer a chance to rest and take stock before going back into the game. And it's this distribution and spacing of safe zones throughout a game which drastically changes the horror. And I think having jarringly contrasted sections of threat and safety make the difference between an average horror game and a great one. Okay, a game I'd really like to talk about is Cry of Fear, and why I think this is a very effective horror game. Cry of Fear very effectively presents clearly defined areas of threat and safety, right next to each other. For example, there's a section where you're walking through a school, the lights are on, everything's fine, schools are associated with safety, nothing's going to happen here, it's all good. And then moments later, a zombie will burst through the wall, the lights will go off, and it's replaced with this horrific soundtrack. So here we have threat and safety placed right next to each other, which makes for very effective horror scenarios. And the second example of this is when you're towards the end of the game, you are rowing a boat across a lake and it's all very serene and there's birdsong in the background and the sun's coming up and you think, oh, there's a cabin in the distance, I just need to reach the cabin and then I'm sure I can escape and get home and win the game. So you go into the cabin, you think, yep, everything's fine, walk down some stairs, the staircase collapses and then you're attacked by 3 witches at the same time. I mean, honestly, I thought I was going to have a heart attack actually at this section because it was so shocking. I mean, I thought the game was over. I thought I'd won the game. I thought I'd survived the ordeal, and I walked down some stairs, and then it's just horrific. It's just awful. This extreme contrast between threat and safety, which is why Cry of Fear is such an effective horror game. Okay, so to summarize, I believe that horror games that work with extremes of emotion, games which present this seesawing, up and down, roller coaster kind of ride, they will always be more successful games because, like I said at the beginning of the video, these games create the peaks and troughs between areas of danger and areas of safety. I would say the game Cry of Fear is probably one of the most scariest games I've played because of these vastly extreme differences between serenity and nightmare. I feel the remake represents threat and safety areas better than other horror games because it tries to mimic real-life trauma scenarios. For example, with home invasion or murder or natural disasters, there would be gaps, there would be pauses to take stock of your situation, and I feel the safe rooms in Remake reflect this. And I feel, like I said in the previous video, because Remake is a more believable scenario, that makes it a scarier game and a more successful horror game. Okay, so that's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to comment, rate and subscribe. You can tweet me at thehorrorofvg, or you can see my blog at thehorrorofvideogames.com. See you next time.